Welcome to Mash the Gas Podcast. Mash the Gas Podcast. Your weekly breakdown of every NASCAR Cup Series race. Here are your hosts, Kevin Batstone and Jeff Davis.
Welcome back, race fans. Another episode of Mash the Gas Podcast. We have a lot to get into here. The round of 12 is over. We're on to the round of 8. We're breaking down the Bank of America Roval 400 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Sky's joining me shortly. Jeff Davis joining me now. Jeff, who mashed the gas the hardest this week?
Well, Kevin and Sky, hey, we have to give it up to Kyle Larson getting his 6th win of the season and his 29th career win. Of course, we know he punched his ticket into the round of 8, only halfway through on points. So really good to see the Hendrick drivers in there, except for one, which we'll get into in just a second. Sky, what were your thoughts about the race this weekend?
I was a little skeptical of turn 7. I was interested to see how it worked, and it did cause a lot of chaos, but I mean, overall, it seemed like people were generally okay with it. I didn't think it was a good race. Was it like super great or anything? No, but I didn't think it was as bad as some people make it out to be. A lot of cars ended up really high in the air, which really surprised me. We had the 48, the 45, and then the 99. All of that was just really insane. But overall, I mean, it was a pretty good race. Kyle Larson really kind of showed up and showed out, typical of him. So it was good to see. It was good to see Hamlin get some good positions as well. He apparently doesn't do too good at the Roval, hasn't been. So it was good on his end there. But overall, it was a pretty good race, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it definitely, I would say, met or exceeded my expectations. I set the bar a little bit low going into the Roval just because it really hasn't delivered, I feel like, in this next-gen car. But the adjustments made to the Turtles on the front stretch I thought were necessary. Those cars were getting far too much air. Martin Truex Jr. saying he felt like he was getting a concussion every lap. So I like the adjustments that were made there. Turn 7, a little bit of chaos, right? We saw Tyler Reddick almost wipe himself and his boss out by overshooting it a bit, but not too much chaos over there. So overall, I still am not super stoked about the Roval being in the playoffs. I mean, it should be an exhibition race in my personal opinion. I don't love the fact that it's a point race, but we survived it. Obviously we're going to talk about Bowman here in a minute, but Jeff, what were some of your big takeaways from this weekend?
Well, kind of like Sky was saying, that turn 7 with that hairpin turn, I thought there was going to be a little bit more chaos, which wasn't as bad. But I was going to say, if we were to give a runner-up Mash the Gas award, I'd have to give it to Tyler Reddick. I mean, when he hit those turtles there and popped up, he was about 3 feet in the air before he came down. Obviously damaged that toe link and was able to get back to the garage and get it repaired and actually come back and almost get a top 10 finish in P11.
Pretty incredible drive for sure. It was cool to see Michael Jordan on the box, just seeing that championship drive, getting aggressive, bumping guys out of the way, to get those points necessary. And at the time, of course, the 22 of Joey Logano was losing spots. So we were watching that point battle right on the bubble. Was he in? Was he out? Definitely a lot of back and forth, but you got to give it up to Kyle Larson, man. I mean, 62 laps led around this place, very difficult racetrack. Once again, just goes to show you, I feel like Kyle Larson kind of is the favorite until he isn't. I mean, he kind of feels like he's got that momentum heading into great racetracks coming up. No question, I feel like the 5 makes the Final 4. But do you guys feel like Kyle Larson is the front runner to win it all?
Well, I kind of think he is, Kevin, because like you said, man, he is mad hard to beat. So I think he is definitely up there, and I think Christopher Bell is right up there as well. I think they're both great drivers, and I think they'll probably punch their way into the round of 4. So we'll just have to wait and see. But, hey, on that note, with Alex Bowman and getting disqualified from the race, Guy, what are you thinking about the penalty that he received and being knocked out of the playoffs, and Joey Logano bumping back into the playoffs now?
That was a very insane day last night because it went from, him being completely out of the playoffs. Somebody, a mutual of mine, a friend of mine who is a Logano fan, he had actually messaged me about 20 minutes prior and told me that there was rumors of it, but I, at the time, did not believe it. And I had been off social media after he got eliminated just because people can be a little mean. So I was like, I'm just going to stay away. But to come back and then see that it was true and it happened, I firstly was shocked that it was Hendrick. I just feel like NASCAR tends to favor Hendrick. I'm not saying they, do a lot of things for them, but I think they tend to favor them. So it was a little surprising to see that they even disqualified him for that. But I was really confused for a while over the penalty, and I thought maybe with the parts flying off of his car when he hit the turtle, or he hit the bump there and ended up really high in the air, Alex Bowman, I thought, maybe they had a really strong case with that, that they could be like, okay, well, it was fine until this. But yeah, I think the most surprising thing for me is not filing an appeal for it, honestly.
It really just doesn't make sense to me why Hendrick Motorsports wouldn't appeal it unless they are 100% admitting guilt. That would be the only reason you wouldn't appeal it. I mean, Bob Pockris was saying on Door Bumper Clear this morning that they're absolutely appeal it. There's nothing to lose. Absolutely nothing to lose by appealing it. At least let them hear it and let them make their case that, like you mentioned, going over those turtles, getting completely, I mean, there's a picture where it looks like he's taken off, like he's an airplane leaving the runway. I mean, just completely off the ground, smacks the ground super hard. No question, Jeff and I were talking before jumping on mic, the weight ballast that they put in these cars, to make driver weight, to accommodate for the fuel weight. All these things have to be equal. If some of that came loose, dislodged, the center of gravity of the car is off, there just seems like there's a lot of variables there that Hendrick could have said, hey, this wasn't our fault. But the fact that they're not appealing it, Jeff, kind of makes me think, all right, we kind of got caught here.
That's the only reason I could think they did something wrong, but it's really tough for me thinking that, okay, they were off by 0.5%. So half of 1% is what they were off on by weight. They let them come in, as far as inspecting it again, filled it up with fuel, filled up all the water lines, made sure there was fluid and everything, and he still did not make minimum weight requirements, which baffles me because we're only looking at about 17 to 18 pounds from what the requirement is. So I do think by them not appealing does show some sort of almost like I said, like it's almost like it's guilty, but I'm wondering what of. Did he have time when he came into the pits for one of his crew members to yank something out that weighed that much? Because we've seen a lot of cars in the past that get in wrecks and they wind up finishing the race without a front bumper or a rear bumper all the way. And those things I know weigh more than 17 or 18 pounds. So I know Sky was happy about it because her boy got in and her other boy got out with old Austin Cindric, which was too bad to see because, I mean, he had a great finish, finishing P4 there. So overall, I think it was a better race than what I had expected it to be. But as far as the penalty with Bowman there, I just don't understand why they did not appeal it.
And I think we're still just a couple hours since that announcement from Hendrick. There's obviously more pieces. NASCAR has confiscated the 48, taking it back to the R&D center. So Hendrick can't even get near that race car, to do their own sort of internal investigation. So, was it a Jeff Gordon? Was it a Rick Hendrick call to say, hey, we're just going to take this thing? I mean, this is for a shot at the championship, though. That's why this isn't, a race back in early spring that's like, well, we'll just, we have other opportunities to win, we're going to move on. This is a shot at a championship, and to have all four of your drivers in the round of 8 is unprecedented. So for them to just not even appeal it, I really do feel like there might be more to the story than we understand.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there as well, Kevin. So, be interesting to see what comes out of it. We probably won't hear. But one thing I did want to touch on here is just a couple hours ago, I heard the news that a engineer from Joe Gibbs Racing that is not going to be with them next year sold proprietary information to another team that is not in the playoffs. And I'm wondering kind of what that's all about, what kind of information was shared to this other team. Obviously, we don't know who the engineer is. The article came out and the gentleman was anonymous on who was speaking, obviously, because he didn't want to get involved in it. But maybe this guy shared some information with his old team with Joe Gibbs, and that would be Richard Childress's driver, the number 8 of Kyle Busch. So a lot to see what's going to happen with that. And, I think the Bowman penalty is done and what's said is done. But I'm wondering what's going on with this engineer that stole proprietary information.
So you're kind of saying here, early reports are indicating it's a possible inside job, kind of a Joe Gibbs affiliate helping out Kyle Busch, because we obviously know Kyle Busch is trying to reach that milestone of winning a Cup Series race 20 years in a row. Was the Roval his best shot? We know we got 2.5 miles coming up, short track at Martinsville and Phoenix, a good opportunity for it. So Jeff, you're kind of thinking that this Joe Gibbs deal was to help out the driver, the number 8 for RCR.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, Kyle Busch does very well in Las Vegas. We all know that. He finished P3 there last year. But if you've got an engineer at Joe Gibbs that's not coming back to him and he stole information and supposedly shared it with a team that's not in the playoffs, what other team could it be? That's kind of my thoughts on it, Kevin. And, Sky, I don't know if you've read much about this yet or heard about it, but very interesting that this would actually happen. And I'm wondering who actually did it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I definitely think it overshadows the whole, not totally, but the whole Bowman disqualification thing, because this is huge news. When I was when it got released and I was, doing my rounds on Twitter, there's a video that was actually posted about a month ago of Ty Gibbs talking about in an interview talking about RCR, where he was insinuating like, I wonder where they got that speed from. So I definitely think your claims with RCR are definitely valid. Granted, he could have been talking about anything, but they say that this has been going on for a little while, supposedly since after the Olympic break. So I'm very surprised by it. I'm surprised that teams haven't Joe Gibbs hasn't taken any action, or they haven't come out and said anything. I'm interested to see kind of what their game plan is, what NASCAR's game plan is. I mean, does the entire garage know who this person is? Because that would make me not want to work with them personally.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, and again, it's so new, we don't really know all the details, but it's big enough that this might be uncovering something that's been going on for a long time, Jeff. I mean, we know NASCAR put in a rule, you got to race 100%. There's a lot of things that are set in stone, but there's always that gray area. And you got guys working on the inside. Sky mentioned the Olympic break. That would make sense, right? Drivers trying to regroup, figure out what's going on, moving forward. Kyle Busch having a terrible season pre-Olympic break. Post, he's been, I think showing out a little bit better. So hard to say. I mean, to start pointing the fingers too early, we don't want to speak too soon. But it's obviously stirring up a big mess. And does it distract these Joe Gibbs drivers like Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell going forward? Kyle Larson mentioned he's going to Cabo. I believe Denny Hamlin said the same thing. Do you think this gets in the drivers' heads, or do they just get to the racetrack and, head down, elbows up?
No, I think once they get to the track, it's head down and elbows up. I think they're in there to run. You're geared to it. These drivers are conditioned that once they get in that car, they're just going to mash the gas. So I don't think it's going to really distract them from their driving. Now, outside, yeah, it might distract maybe the teams a little bit. I'm sure there's a lot of chat going on about it. But old Joe Gibbs, he can't be happy about this. But with Christopher Bell, he obviously punched his way in, halfway through the race too, as far as points go. Christopher Bell and Denny Hamlin have got a lot to think about if some of their information is being shared with other teams. So again, I think it's gonna be really interesting to see. As far as the Roval goes, I don't think it helped anyone out there specifically. But as to your point with the track itself, Kevin, I don't like it in the playoffs, and I don't like it on the schedule as far as a points race. And the one I dislike the most, though, would be Talladega being in the playoffs. I just don't like it as a crapshoot. So to see both of these tracks coming back into the playoffs for next year kind of has me baffled.
Yeah, we had kind of talked about the round of 12 and what it looks like, obviously kicking off in Kansas, which I thought was a phenomenal race. It was great to be there, boots on the ground, followed by Talladega and the Roval. So basically 2 wild cards. Denny Hamlin mentioned it early on Actions Detrimental. If you can survive the round of 12, and that's what it is. I mean, if you can survive Dega and the Roval, you have a shot. It's back to zero. Everything is reset. You're getting back to NASCAR's grassroots, back-to-back mile and a halves in a Martinsville for a shot to get into Phoenix. So the back half of the playoffs is traditional NASCAR. The first half of the playoffs feels to me, Jeff, like, kind of what NASCAR's been doing with, things like the Coliseum, taking Atlanta and making it a super speedway, bringing in the Roval, trying all these new experimental tracks and getting away from the traditional grassroots racing. I'm with you. I'm glad that Watkins Glen is out of the playoffs for next year. The Roval is in. Will it be in 26? The buzz is that the Charlotte Oval, which would be the 500 miler, not the Coke 600, will return in 26. I can get behind that. Sky, what are your thoughts on the Roval? Do you think it has a place in NASCAR? Should it be in the playoffs, or should it be considered more of an exhibition race?
Yeah, I'm definitely not a big Roval fan, but I feel like I would still like to see it maybe in a rotation schedule for like the Clash. Could be interesting. Just something, like you said, an exhibition race. So something definitely not in the playoffs. I do not enjoy it in the playoffs. I do not enjoy Talladega in the playoffs either. It's really unfortunate, Joey was doing good. Well, 28 drivers were potentially doing good in Talladega and ended up in one big crash. And I don't think that's very fair to these drivers. So some of these races, they start to feel almost gimmicky, and it's really hard to even want your driver to do good because it almost feels like it's impossible for them to do good. I definitely like to see them off the track. I mean, or off, at least out of the playoffs, especially Talladega. The Roval probably just off the points schedule for sure. But sometimes I just take NASCAR how it comes, and I'm just like, I don't even know. You just got to keep going, I guess.
I think you said it best. I mean, everyone knows the schedule, everyone knows the rules, and that's why a lot of drivers, kind of have, like the older drivers, you can tell Martin Truex Jr. is checked out. I mean, every time they put a microphone in front of him, he's like, I'm done. I'm done. I don't, he's, Denny Hamlin kind of the same way. These guys drove in the, kind of the 2010s era of NASCAR where things were a lot different. And these younger drivers, these up and comers, I think this next gen car, this schedule has benefited a bit. We've seen a shift in kind of the way that these drivers race each other, a little bit more aggression. We see guys like Kyle Busch saying everyone just runs each other over now. So NASCAR definitely is in a transitional period. But, as far as the integrity of the sport and where we're at, they wanted to create drama. That was the whole idea of the playoffs. That was why they wanted cutoff races to be road courses and super speedways. It does create storylines. I mean, here we are talking about it, of course. But from a competitive NASCAR standpoint, does it really highlight the best driver in NASCAR? Arguably, Kyle Larson being that driver is kind of the front runner, Jeff, heading into the round of 8 here. A lot of momentum, a lot of points, behind him heading into racetracks he's won at. I mean, like I said earlier, Kyle Larson kind of is the favorite until he isn't. But we saw what happened in Kansas, right? Lap 20, Kyle Larson goes into the wall off turn 2. Anything can happen at any racetrack.
Yeah, and that's crazy. When we saw Kyle Larson just, shoot right into the wall and just smash the hell out of his car. But to have to come back and run Talladega, like Sky was mentioning, 28 cars getting involved in that wreck. It's not about talent. It's just about luck. And we don't want to see luck in the playoffs. We want to see the skill that these drivers possess, and we want to see them earn it. We don't want to see a crapshoot. I mean, it was unfortunate that Austin Cindric got a little far out in front of the line and got, lost his draft a little bit, which caused some guys to kind of back into each other. And that's kind of what caused that whole, scenario there. But again, I don't want to see drivers getting in on luck. So, I think going into this next round, like you mentioned, the tracks that are coming up, it's going back to the roots of what NASCAR has. So I think it's going to be a much more fun and a much better competition to see these next few races than what we saw in the last round. So, I know Sky was, talking about the Roval and the points. I agree. It definitely shouldn't be in the playoffs. But I think next week in Las Vegas is going to be really fun.
Vegas is definitely going to be wild. It resets everything. It's a mile and a half, pretty similar to Kansas. I do expect Denny to run well there. And while I'm on Denny Hamlin, of course, most of NASCAR wanted him out, right? The fan base, they can't stand Denny. They want him out. I picked him in January to win the championship. He's still alive and arguably heading into some of his best racetracks, ahead. Denny's got a lot on his plate though, right? I mean, he's got this appeal going on or this lawsuit against NASCAR for this charter situation. He's running for a championship. Jeff Burton wrote him off. I mean, in the pre-race, Jeff Burton said, Denny's out. He's not going to make it through. Jeff, I was texting you during that Roval race a little bit, trying to understand as the points fell. Denny kind of launched off the green flag 20th, 21st, and was trending just below the cutoff line to make it into the round of 8. And as stage 1 progressed, we got towards the end, Denny started really not gaining much track position, ran 15th to 20th most of the race, which he admitted himself. He's not the best at road courses, something he wants to get better at. But the way that they were live tracking that points, I found extremely confusing, coming in plus 30 and then immediately being on the cut line when the flag dropped. I thought that was a little bit difficult to follow. And I almost kind of wondered if there was, I don't want to say fabrication, but do they do that to create storylines and create that kind of excitement? I mean, when it came down to Logano and Reddick, that was the focal point. They weren't even showing the 5. They're like, oh, by the way, the 5 is going to win this race, but we're focused on this points battle between Joey Logano and Tyler Reddick.
Yeah, it was pretty damn exciting. I will admit that. And so I don't know if it's manipulated or not. But Denny Hamlin came in at P14, and I think he lit a fire under his own ass just a little bit to make sure he got into the playoffs. But with Joey Logano finishing P8, I thought it was kind of interesting the way those points kind of worked there. So it was fun to watch. It's interesting the way everything has turned out for this race. And, we're just going to have to kind of take it from here and move on to Vegas.
So with Joey Logano back in, of course, Sky carrying that 22 tattoo on your leg there, mega fan. How does this feel as a Joey Logano fan? And what does that, because we heard his post race, right? He makes the comments like, yeah, we could have found 4 points here or there throughout the year. You can look at a lot of opportunities. He's got a fresh start and he's heading to a racetrack that he can win at, followed up by another racetrack he can win at. Do you feel, Sky, like this is a huge momentum boost for the 22? Would it have been any different if he made it in naturally on points? But the fact that he's now added back into the playoffs, how do you feel like that's going to change their game plan or, kind of recharge them up headed to Vegas?
So I definitely feel like I want to say it's almost better that he got in this way because you went from being like defeated, like I didn't do enough. You start overthinking every little instance throughout the year. Richmond, earlier, Atlanta. Like you think of all these times where you could have gained more points. And then to get like that call and like, hey, you have a second chance at this. I mean, the last time he had a second chance. So I definitely feel like this is going to be hopefully really good. He had these tracks that are coming up, he is good at, he has won at. So, I mean, think back to 2018 Martinsville. So I definitely feel like this is really good. As a Logano fan, though, I'm very happy because there's not a lot of time for your drivers on the good end of something. Typically, something bad is happening and he gets caught up in something. So it's really great to have that. But it's not, how do I word this? It's not the best feeling that, like, yeah, my driver got in because another driver disqualified. But then I always try to think positively too. There are three other drivers that could have been in ninth, but it was Joey. So he did what he had to be in a position where this happened. He still advanced.
Yeah, and even after the race, I saw a comment that he made, and you kind of brought up Richmond a minute ago, and Joey Logano was actually, wondering, 4 or 5 points, where did those points lie? If, being that he didn't get into the playoffs as of the end of the race, and he was blaming it on Richmond. He's pissed off at old Dylan there for that wreck, running him, Joey Logano, and the 11 of Denny Hamlin out of that race. But, yeah, it is very interesting to see, as he's mentioned, a lot of people think that Hendrick is kind of a favorite of NASCAR. So to have them actually penalize Alex Bowman and bring in Logano in there, I think you're right. I think it does light a fire under him as well, being, hey, we got in. I don't know how we did it. By the grace of God, we got lucky. And so now we're just going to have to, light it up and rock and roll for the rest of the playoffs. And I think Logano can do that.
Well, we know if he can make it to Phoenix, he can win. He did it in 2022. Jeff, you and I were standing there, of course, as Joey hoisted the trophy. But does it put an asterisk on it, Jeff, right? Because I think back to 2013 when Jeff Gordon was added into the playoffs as a 13th driver at the time when it was a 12-driver playoff system at Richmond, when Michael Waltrip Racing got caught for doing some foul play. They added Gordon in, and Gordon ended up finishing 7th that year overall. So that's kind of why I was thinking, like, what does it do momentum-wise? Because now if Joey does go to Phoenix, does win it, takes the championship here in 24, is it kind of one of those deals where Joey goes, well, thanks NASCAR for disqualifying Bowman?
That's tough to call. I mean, it's definitely a weird situation because I'm still kind of curious about that weight. Where did that weight go? Like I said, we know that, Bowman came down really hard off like in the first 5 laps. So I don't know if something fell off of his car, but what weighs enough where we wouldn't have seen that amount of metal or, something equivalent to 17, 18 pounds or more of weight. So it's going to, I don't know what to think about it, Kevin.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the question is, right, where did that weight go? We know he made minimum weight in pre-qualifying on Saturday, and then he's, approximately 17 pounds short on Sunday. So, like we mentioned in the top half of the show, the fact that they're not appealing it tells me that, whatever kind of data and intel they had suggested it's not worth appealing. We're just going to have to take it on the chin and move on. And now Bowman just has to reset, refocus, and try to win a couple races here, before the season is out. So, that part of it's interesting. But one of the other things that Joey brought up in his post race was, just to confuse NASCAR fans, he says, we're still in it for an owners and manufacturers championship. And that part of it is kind of always interesting. But as I look at these live results right now, Team Penske, of course, with Joey Logano is an 8th on the owner points for the owners championship. Kyle Larson, of course, dominating the 20 of Christopher Bell in second place there, 25 points back. So, of course, they still have something to race for. We've seen that a lot, but that gets overlooked a lot in NASCAR. But Joey brought up a good point, and I was curious to get your guys' thoughts on this. He said, everyone cares about the drivers' championship because the drivers are the guys that sell merch and T-shirts and all the fun stuff, pack the grandstands, but it pays more to win the owners' championship. And I found that interesting.
Yeah, it really is interesting that would pay that much. And I think you're right. It is overlooked a lot. That money obviously makes a big difference to these teams. So, whether it's owners points or winning that championship, they all want to win. So it's going to be really cool to see this in Vegas next week. I think it's going to be a fun race. I think there's going to be a lot of really good drivers up there. It's kind of a toss up. I think with the drivers that are in the playoffs right now, and do we have someone come in that's not in the playoffs and interrupt Vegas? Someone like Kyle Busch can come in and do that. Martin Truex, he needs a win. Kyle Busch, he needs a win. It'd be kind of weird to see one of those two drivers without a win for this year. So maybe it'll be one of them.
Yeah, very possible. When we look at Vegas, I do think from here on out that the likelihood of us seeing non-playoff drivers win is kind of diminishing. But at the same time, this next gen car, anything is possible. We can see a lot of guys get up there, and stir things up, just like Ross Chastain did, back in Kansas. He went out there and got it. Of course, Chastain won Phoenix last year when Blaney won the championship. Always gets overlooked, but race wins still add up. So, as we turn the page to Las Vegas, and starting to dive in, kind of crunch numbers and look at this, I feel like Hendrick is kind of the front runner headed into this thing, just based on their performance here over the last couple of seasons. Sky, who are you looking at here, headed into Vegas? We know it's a mile and a half. We know this style of racing. Who do you have on your list that you feel is going to be strong, not only from a fantasy perspective, but a championship perspective?
Someone I think that gets overlooked a lot, I think Christopher Bell is someone that could really potentially do good at Vegas, or even win his way into the Final Four, because he's done that 2 years in a row. So he's definitely someone I would look out for. Hamlin, he's pretty good at Vegas. If he can just, focus back in, I feel like he's just been not Denny Hamlin like this last round of 12. But hopefully he can lock back in, because these are some good rounds or good tracks for him, and he can definitely potentially get a win and get into the Final Four. Joey Logano too. I feel like he's good. No, I would say kind of back burner Joey Logano. Kyle Larson is probably, if he could just not beat himself, because like you said, he's the favorite until he isn't, until he's caught up in some wreck, making some move that backfires on him, or even just, having a tire issue, something completely out of his control. I feel like if everything goes right, then Kyle Larson all day.
I would agree with that.
I think you're right. Yeah. So as far as the 11 goes, it's like he just hasn't had what's been, what we consider Denny Hamlin quality for the last, 5-6 races. So, this one might be good for him, Kevin.
Well, here's what I'll say about that, right? Denny, we know, is a great mile and a half racer. At Kansas, he had an opportunity. He was the fastest car on the racetrack. He was lights out. But every time he came to pit road, they had, the left rear tire didn't get tight. The hose got caught under the car. It was nothing but problems on pit road, and it killed his track position, and he kept fighting back. So mile and a half, I do feel fit Denny extremely strong. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to win to make it to Phoenix, but you look at Vegas, you look at Homestead, back-to-back top 5s, top 10s, puts you in good position. You survive Martinsville, you could possibly get into Phoenix on points. But yeah, to your point, and to my point earlier about the first half of the playoffs, definitely didn't suit Denny well. Denny really hasn't run typical Denny Hamlin style, I feel like, since St. Louis. And he blames it on his little puppy that they found kind of wandering around the motorcade. He says it's the curse of the puppy. They thought about getting rid of the thing, which I think is kind of funny. But Denny's he can control his own destiny at this point. He's headed racetracks he's confident in. And I do have the 11 going to the Final Four. Of course, I'm rooting for the 11. Everyone knows that. I picked him in January. I want the 11 to win the championship.
Well, he's 8 points under, Kevin. So, as long as he gets a good finish out of this, he'll probably be safe for right now. But he's got some tough competition. To Sky's point, Christopher Bell, I think he's an underlooked driver as well sometimes. Even though he's been running super good this whole season, I think he's overlooked a little bit. So, Christopher Bell's great.
Well, let's not forget, Seabell is one of the few, if not the only driver that has made it to the Final Four consecutively season after season since going into this next gen. So he knows how to run consistently. But I think the sleeper here, we can't forget about Ryan Blaney for old Team Penske there. Blaney is the defending champion. He knows how this system works. He's good at getting points when needed. I do think Ryan Blaney is definitely a threat to make Phoenix and possibly back it up. Blaney's kind of that silent sniper. A lot of folks don't have him on the radar, but here he comes. And next thing you know, he could be going for back-to-back championships.
Yeah, I love Ryan Blaney. He's got a great attitude, and I think that mullet's kind of helping him out. He grew that shit out, and being 4 points under the cutoff line for the round of 8 now. I think he's a damn good driver, and I think he could definitely punch his ticket to Phoenix. He just has to have a couple good races, and hopefully nothing happens to his equipment. But yeah, Ryan Blaney is a great pick.
Yeah, I think Blaney's a good guy to keep an eye on, heading into this weekend. As I look at kind of the previous results here in Las Vegas, the Pennzoil 400 earlier this year, Kyle Larson, big shocker, won the race, followed by Tyler Reddick, Ryan Blaney, Ross Chastain, and Ty Gibbs. So I think, a lot of those drivers are good to fit in there. Kyle Larson, of course, winning this race again last year in Las Vegas. So it's Larson across the board. I feel like he's the favorite till he isn't. But Seabell, again, just running there right behind him. Seabell's a great pick. Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, Team Penske. Of course, we know they're the three top dogs, but I really feel like JGR and Hendrick could dominate the Final Four here, unless Team Penske can get in there and mix things up. So going to be interesting. I love these racetracks coming up. I'm okay with Homestead. Martinsville is a great cutoff race. Especially now that they have eliminated the Hail Melon rule, right? So you can't be wall riding your way into Phoenix, but that's just the way these playoffs are designed, Jeff, right? We've seen it year after year now, especially in this next gen car. Making it to Phoenix and winning it are two very different things. And we might end up in a situation again where you have a Ross Chastain win the race and your champion finishes fourth or fifth. But I still feel like it's going to take winning Phoenix to win this championship. Kyle Larson, I feel like probably is the favorite, but man, this thing can get interesting every race.
It is. And, with Penske having two drivers in, Hendrick's got three drivers in there. And of course, we got Joe Gibbs and 23XI in there as well. So I do think that the Gibbs and the Hendrick cars have an advantage as far as going into Phoenix. Penske, I think they can do it though. Joey Logano is a damn good driver, and so is Ryan Blaney. Between those two, I don't know who I'd pick. Sky, I know who you're rooting for, but do you think Blaney can outrun Joey Logano in these next three races?
He definitely has potential, but there's something about even numbers in Joey Logano, and I'm not trying to be funny when I say that. I mean, think about what happened. The whole DQ thing is insane, but somehow it's an even number here, and now Logano has a chance to go to the Final Four. So I feel like there's something with pressure, and Logano, he can really turn it up. I do see potential at maybe having like a split, like just two teams having the Final Four, like probably two Hendricks, could be two Penske's, could be two JGR. Like, I don't know. I definitely feel the potential there.
So are you saying that I should pull up my DraftKings app and put a bet down on Joey Logano to win it all right now, Sky, being that we have the even number year and, the fact that he's still alive? Does that, because I think Joey Logano to win the championship is like a plus 450 right now. Should I put that bet in?
I honestly would because the fact that I know my driver and this second chance, he is not gonna take it lightly. You do not get chances like this in NASCAR. It is rare. Like I think back to, remember 2020 with Martinsville and Chase Elliott, where his team member had the brain or the thought process to reset himself, which ultimately sent him to the Final Four, and he won the championship. I feel like this doesn't happen, and when it does, you have to take full advantage of it.
And I feel like with Joey's experience, he knows what he needs to do now. I mean, you got basically a second shot at life here. You got your second win to go out and run for a championship, and avoiding any trouble or chaos on the racetrack, not getting caught up. And we're really not going to see that over the next 3 weeks. We're not really at tracks where you're going to get caught in a big one or get run over in turn 7 at a Roval. You kind of are controlling your own destiny. And that's one thing I do like about the second half of the playoffs, Jeff. These tracks coming up are more traditional grassroots tracks for sure. Starting this weekend out there in the desert in Las Vegas, Nevada, it's going to be interesting. I mean, Joey's sponsor has been a part of the spring race with the Pennzoil 400. He's won it before. He knows what he needs to do. I just don't know if I have Joey going all the way to the Final Four. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, the plus 450, it might be worth it. I know Kyle Larson was plus 400 when I put $100 on him. That was a good bet. Was glad to win that one. And then I spent it all at Red Lobster. But, I think it's going to be really good to see, what's going to come with these next three tracks. I'm really excited to move forward and get on to Las Vegas, Kevin.
Yeah, it should be good. It should be a great round of 8 kicking off here. Like I mentioned, I love these racetracks coming up. I do feel like Kyle Larson's the favorite till he isn't. But Seabell, there's just something I like about Seabell. His calm, cool, collected demeanor, the way he drives, he can run consistently at a lot of different styles of racetracks. as I mentioned before, one of the only drivers, if not the only driver, to make it to the Final Four in this next-gen playoff format. Seabell can get it done, and I feel like he would also be a good bet. Great fantasy pick for this weekend. But I also got to think Kyle Busch, man. I mean, Kyle Busch, he knows the chances are running out. He's got 4 opportunities to continue this race streak. So great, non-playoff driver pick there. However, as we mentioned earlier, with some of the inside trading going on in NASCAR, how much does that affect the 8 going into this weekend and beyond? Obviously, a lot more to come on that.
Yeah, we're just going to have to wait and see. But, we're winding down on time here. And I want to thank Sky, especially for being on the podcast again. It's been a few months since we've had you. So thank you very much, Sky.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, always fun to bring you in as an analyst and kind of talk racing. It's fantastic. So before we wrap up here, Sky, where do you want our listeners to go, follow you, get in touch? Give them your plugs.
Yeah, you can follow me anywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter X, whatever, at NASCAR Sky. I'm very active on Twitter. It's a good place to catch me and have a chat. Instagram, I'm always posting funny stories. So I'd love to have you guys follow me.
Fantastic. We'll include that in the show notes down below. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. We're on to Vegas. Jeff Davis and I will be back next Monday to break down all of the action here as the round of 8 moves on. We're out of here. We're on to Vegas. Roll the dice, baby. And Jeff, until then,
mash the gas.